Peak Design just released a 45-liter outdoor bag that are made for photographers who enjoy the great outdoors.
Like me, a landscape photographer.
And today, I'll be giving you my first impressions of this bag.
What's up, y'all? It's Project Photography back with another video, and today, a lot of landscape photographers have been waiting for Peak Design to release a outdoor type of backpack that fits a lot of landscape photographers' needs, and they've finally done it. So today, I want to give you guys my first impressions on this bag for landscape photographers. And before we get started, I just want to give a quick shout out to my friend Drake, who allowed me to use this bag for these videos. He ordered it early on the Kickstarter campaign and got it pretty early before pre-orders were even released. So thank you, Drake, I appreciate it. So let's first talk about the bag storage. And it might sound unimpressive to talk about at first, but I promise you, this is a major component of this bag. Because the back access compartment is essentially one large storage unit that is empty when you first get the bag. You have to put camera cubes or packing cubes or some sort of cubes inside the bag for it to fill out. And with this bag, you essentially get 3 cube units, which you can actually fit quite a bit. For me, I like to put my large camera cube inside, and I found that it is actually really nice. It takes up a huge amount of the space, and you can put a ton of camera gear inside of this one large camera cube. And I found for me, I can comfortably fit my normal landscape photography kit in there with plenty of room. I only use about 2/3 of the camera cube itself, probably enough for only a medium camera cube. One thing to kind of note is that at the top of the camera cube itself, it does get blocked off a bit. So we will have an issue when it comes to putting certain pieces of gear in there. I personally like to have smaller, more softer pieces of gear like rocket blowers, microfiber cloths, or even filters. I feel like those pieces of gear fit nicely at the top there. And the compartment can essentially be customized to fit whatever configuration of packing cubes, camera cubes, and it especially is really nice in a travel sort of setup. Now, if you don't put any of these cubes inside of the camera bag itself, the bag will collapse and it'll lose a lot of its structural integrity, which is kind of an issue if, let's just say, you only have the bottom part of it filled, but don't have any cubes at the top. That might be an issue when you want to keep the structural integrity of the bag. So realistically, you do have to use this camera bag with Peak Design's cubes. And of course, this camera bag has back access, which is really nice when you want to go on shoot and you want to switch out your gear really fast. You have all of your gear accessible all at once. Now, this bag does have a top compartment that has an extra sense of storage. Now, to be able to open it, you have to pull the tab, and then you can essentially unclasp the magnetic clasp at top, and then you have access to this full body of top compartment storage. And it's really nice because it actually does create a pretty nice seal with those magnetic clasps. You can roll it down and then pull the drawstrings up in order to have a nice seal. Now, this is something that I will need to test more in terms of how well it actually seals relative to the elements, but so far it looks pretty good. But once that top part is open, you have access to essentially anything you want to throw in there. However, one thing I did find is that you can see the camera cube up top. There's no base to actually catch any of these smaller items. So for example, if you were to put something really small in there, it could fall through to the bottom of the bag. So I only really recommend putting larger items in there. However, Drake did find one important way to set it up if you didn't want to have that base. You could have, let's just say, a medium packing cube at the bottom, and then you could have a small camera cube up top to be able to throw stuff in there and it catches it so it doesn't actually fall through to the bottom of the bag. And honestly, if you want to have that set up, I think it's really nice if you want to have those smaller pieces of gear up top. But it does have a zipper inside, so if you want to throw small things like SD cards or other small items in there, you definitely could do that without it falling to the bottom of the bag. So one thing that I think Peak Design did a really good job on this bag on is the side pockets. Now, they're really deep in terms of the first pocket because there's 2. There's a much deeper one on the side, and there's one on the side of that that is a smaller one. But when we're talking about the deeper ones, I think this is a great design because you're going to be putting things like tripods, water bottles in there. And for the most part, having these deep pockets makes sure that the tripod and water bottle doesn't move around a ton. And on top of it, there's an anchor there to be able to have a more secure connection for your tripod and water bottle. I think this is a feature that should be implemented in more camera bags, to be honest with you. And something else to note too is that these pockets don't protrude out a lot to the side, so it actually stays nice and compact to the side of the bag, so you're not having these tripods and water bottles swinging around. And if you move on to the front of the bag, we do have another front compartment there. They're able to throw some probably bigger things in there. And one thing that's cool is that this front part should be weather resistant, so you're able to protect those items inside. And if that wasn't already enough storage, this bag has even more of it on these front shoulder pockets here. This is big enough to essentially put a phone inside. This is a Google Pixel 7. You can easily throw it in there with plenty of room, very comfortable. And you also have one on the other side as well. And additionally, on these hip pockets here, we have another one on the left hand side. There's more of a mesh. Doesn't have anything to actually seal it, but luckily on the other side, we have one that does have a zipper attachment to it. And storage on this bag is a major win for landscape photographers. But the bag also does the fundamentals well as a landscape photographer. And it has things like the hip belt, shoulder strap, and low lifters, but it actually does them quite well. And let's start with the shoulder straps, because to me, these are an incredibly important part of a bag because this is where you have the most contact with your shoulders. And with this one, it's very in line with a lot of how the other P Design bags are. They tend to be more firm, hold its shape pretty well, and this one in particular actually does a really nice job at contouring to my shoulders. And one thing I'm a big fan of these shoulder straps in particular is that there's a lot of padding on the sides of the shoulder strap. So when you have your shoulders in, it doesn't feel like it's rubbing against this awkward material. It still feels nice and supported and comfortable. Plus, we do actually have quite a bit of length on this shoulder strap. As you can see here for me, I actually have it, loosened up quite a bit, and we still are able to cover the front part of ourselves. And that's really important, especially if you want to loosen up those shoulder straps to put more weight on the hip belt, which as a landscape photographer, you should be doing majority of the time to loosen up that strain on your shoulders. And very similar to how a lot of other landscape bags are, this bag you're able to adjust where you actually want the shoulder strap to be relative to the back of the bag to adjust to the height of your back, which is really important to make sure that you customize it per your size. And now let's move on to the hip belt, because to me, having a hip belt is an incredibly important part of any landscape bag. It takes the weight off your shoulders and it puts it into a place where it's able to support more weight for longer periods of time. And this hip belt is kind of a mixed bag for me. First of all, I wish this hip belt was a little bit longer. It is just slightly shorter than I want it to be. I wish it kind of came out a little bit more to provide even more padding, but it just doesn't. But it hasn't really had a major effect in terms of its comfortability. I kind of understand why they made it this way, so you can go ahead and stow these hip belts back into the back of the bag. So in a sense, I understand why they did it, but if you did want to go ahead and take off these hip belts, it's actually quite easy. All you have to do is push in and then pull up, and the hip belts come out pretty seamlessly. And on top of it, the hip belts itself are quite small, so it doesn't actually take up a lot of space if you did want to store it somewhere. And I'm actually a big fan of how P Design actually structured this hip belt, because as you can see, this bag doesn't sag. And now my Shimoda does this, which is a major gripe that I have about that bag, but this bag doesn't. It actually doesn't sag at all, and I think this hip belt actually has a nice sense of support for the bag, and it makes it just more comfortable in the long run. And last but not least, low lifters are a part of this bag, and they're actually really good. The low lifters themselves are essentially able to have it where if you loosen up these shoulder straps, it's able to have less space between your back and the back of the bag, which means that it's not pulling back on you if you, let's just say, didn't have low lifters, which is why you have to have them, especially if you're hiking for long periods of time. And these ones do a good job. They're very secure, and it doesn't actually scrunch up the material here with the shoulder strap. As you can see, the shoulder strap still stays nice and contoured relative to my back, and I think it actually looks really good, so there's no extra material here to make it uncomfortable. And what's cool is the actual mechanism that's used to lock these low lifters in place is the same ones as the anchors, and I think they actually done a great job in making sure that it locks and it stays in place. It doesn't adjust around when you're actually hiking and moving around. And so far, the outdoor bag does a great job at hitting a lot of the marks that make a great landscape bag. However, there's still a few key components that I really need to make sure that I test to make an honest and accurate review. One of them is comfort. For me, as a landscape photographer, I cannot stress enough how important a comfortable bag is for landscape photography. Because majority of the time, we're hiking really far hikes. Sometimes it could be 10, 20 miles even, and you want to make sure you have a really comfortable bag. So far, I do like how this bag feels when it comes to comfortability, but it is something that I will need more miles on to be able to test, give you guys a more accurate depiction of how the comfort looks like. And the second key component is durability. Of course, they have touted this bag to be weatherproof essentially, and to have the best high quality materials. But for me, I'm putting my bag on the ground in situations where there's a lot of rocks, sand, water, and other elements that can mess up the bag. I mean, if you just look at my Shimoda Action X30, it is absolutely beaten up, but it has stayed in super good condition. So I want to make sure that this bag is able to keep up to similar standards or even better. And these two components will only come with more testing and more reps, more miles, and more shooting. So I have personally thought that this bag has been pretty good in the one shoot that I've had so far, but we just need more testing to make an accurate and honest review. So yeah guys, what do you think about the Peak Design 45-liter outdoor bag? I personally think it's a really interesting one and something that a lot of landscape photographers have been waiting for. But I want to hear what you guys think about this bag down in the comment section down below. Anyways guys, thank you so much for experiencing the world with me today, and please feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.